may signify.
So have you ever wondered why the completely normal, everyday sounds in our homes suddenly become absolutely terrifying the second the lights go out? Well, today we are completely deconstructing a really masterful piece of short horror called Unknown Number. We're going to look super closely at how the author takes a totally mundane, relatable situation and just escalates it into pure claustrophobic terror. And the real trick here? It's all about audio. It's about how they manipulate the male character's reality using sound, and how they totally violate the spaces we consider to be absolutely safe. We are dropped right into the tension from the very first word. Jesus, right? The protagonist is violently jolted awake from a half-doze in his armchair, and it's 1:45. And what actually wakes him up? This jarring, extremely loud, brand-new Halloween-themed ringtone playing at absolute maximum volume. You know the exact type, right? The kind of sound that guarantees an instant adrenaline spike. The author establishes this baseline of pure annoyance and a racing heart rate right out of the gate, making sure we're completely on edge before anything actually sinister even goes down.
Okay, let's dive into this. The author grounds the whole story in a totally universal annoyance that I think we can all relate to, which is frustrating technology. See, our guy lost his iPhone in the city about a week ago, so now he's stuck using this $20 prepaid gas station replacement phone that his dad picked up for him. The screen is literally the size of a credit card, and he has no clue how to use the thing. It's just a super relatable friction point, you know, that feeling of fumbling around with cheap tech? But it brilliantly masks the actual danger that's coming.
So the annoyance just keeps building. He hauls himself out of the chair, realizes his TV is mysteriously playing static instead of the satellite channels he left it on, and goes right back to digging around for the TV remote. He actually presses his ear right up against the armchair cushions to listen for it, and then bam! The phone rings again at full, creepy blast right next to his head. "Damn it, what?" he yells into the receiver, but instead of an answer, or even just heavy breathing, there is just dead silence. His frustration is absolutely peaking here, but that eerie, empty silence on the line, yeah, that is our first real, undeniable red flag. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this intense progression of auditory cues. The author is literally manipulating our nerves, and the male protagonist's nerves, purely through sound. I mean, we start with that jarring ringtone, then we move to the incredibly unsettling white noise of TV static filling up a dark room, and then we contrast all of that with the heavy, dead silence on the actual phone call. These auditory elements are designed to keep him and us completely off balance. We're essentially being primed by sound, setting the absolute perfect stage for the physical shocks that are about to happen.
And then the tension abruptly shifts gears. We go from mundane, everyday annoyance to absolute primal fear. Right after he tosses the phone onto the chair in frustration, pop! The light bulb violently blows out. The power is just gone. In a split second, he is thrust into total suffocating darkness. The rules of the game have just changed entirely. Instinct immediately takes over. Pure, animalistic flight response. He frantically grabs the tiny phone for some kind of light, bolts down the hallway, jumps into bed, pulls the covers up incredibly tight and just curls right into a fetal position. He's seeking out that ultimate safe space, panting hard from the sheer, overwhelming panic of the dark. Just imagine lying there, panting under the covers. The house is completely empty. You're just trying to catch your breath, just trying to form a single rational thought. You look down at that tiny, glowing screen, and you realize you forgot to hang up. But it doesn't say unknown number anymore. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact moment the psychological trap just snaps shut. Look at this terrifying contrast. Initially, his first thought was that it was just a harmless glitch, you know, maybe a fake self-call feature on this cheap new phone. But the horrifying reality staring back at him from that tiny screen, the number currently on the line, is his own old number. The very iPhone he lost in the city last week is calling him right now from inside his own dark house. Let's just pause for a second and really connect with this dread. I want you to put yourself in that exact scenario. You are entirely alone. Your parents are away. Your terrified mind is racing through 1,000 horrible implications of that phone call. And then a physical sensation completely overrides the digital terror. You realize the bed you just jumped into is already warm. Let's map out this climax in real time, because it is wild how terrifyingly fast this escalates. At 0 seconds, the phone revelation hits him.
At 5 seconds, the chilling realization of the warm bed. Just 5 seconds after that, the jarring beep-beep of a text message totally breaks the silence. All of this happens in a mere 20 seconds. The trap is closing so incredibly fast, giving him absolutely no time to process, think, or escape. That piercing text message tone completely shatters whatever quiet was left in the room. He checks the message from his lost phone, and it simply reads, "It's under your pillow." Think about that agonizingly slow realization. His trembling hand slides underneath the pillow, expecting the safety of a weapon or maybe just empty space, and instead his fingers grip the lost TV remote. The exact same item he was searching for in the living room just moments ago, planted perfectly in his supposed safe haven. And right after finding that remote, from under the covers, he hears it. The bedroom door closes. And then the final horrifying audio cue. Click. It locks. From the inside. Which leaves us with a deeply chilling question. Who is in the room with him, and what happens next? His ultimate safe space has become a locked cage. It is a masterful, terrifying conclusion that relies entirely on sound and psychological dread. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And sleep tight.
All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking a masterful, tightly wound psychological thriller by an author named Boudica, simply called The Doll. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of a story that brilliantly subverts your expectations at literally every single turn. We'll map out exactly how the author manipulates our focus, feeding us this classic ghost story setup, only to rip the rug right out from under us in the most horrifying way you can imagine. We're zeroing in entirely on the mystery behind the doll, looking at how this seemingly innocent little object becomes the absolute epicenter of a chilling biological and psychological nightmare. It scared her. She told me she had the feeling it was constantly watching her. That is the terrified wife's confession. Right off the bat, the author plunges us into the deep end of a gripping mystery. We immediately assume we know what we're getting into, right? A haunted object, a cursed antique, your classic supernatural tale. The husband, who's actually narrating this whole thing for us, presents his wife's terror like it's just a bizarre puzzle to be solved. But before we can wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of what's actually going on, we need to hit rewind. We need to see exactly how things devolved into this state of pure paranoia. Chapter 1, The Perfect Birthday Gift. The story kicks off with this deceptively idyllic scene, a loving husband giving his wife a beautiful, totally innocent birthday present. And according to our narrator, it was a massive hit. He tells us she absolutely loved it at first, said it was incredibly beautiful. And it's exactly this setup, this perfect domestic tranquility, that makes the horror to come hit so much harder. Listen to the highly specific language the narrator uses here. He highlights its physical features, saying her hair was so soft and the dress was so pretty. He notes she kept it right by the bed, looking at us sleep with big, blue, unmoving eyes. The author is building a massive contrast here. By hyping up the doll's softness, the pretty dress, those innocent, unmoving blue eyes, the story is totally lulling us into a false sense of security. It's this beautifully crafted image of pure innocence, strategically placed just to make the ending completely gut-wrenching. Which brings us to Chapter 2, A Growing Paranoia. This is where the narrative leans hard into classic paranormal dread. That perfect domestic bubble, it completely shatters. The wife's love for the doll sours really, really fast. Our narrator mentions he notices something is bothering her, but at first she just brushes it off as being silly. Let's trace this rapid psychological spiral because it happens fast. Hour 1, she loved the beautiful gift. By day 3, she is utterly fixated on it, keeping it constantly in sight on the table while she cleans the house. Fast forward to week 2, and she's completely closed off, bothered and distant. Then we hit the climax of this phase in week 3, she breaks down crying. But here's the thing. The catalyst for that breakdown is the husband threatening to drag her to a doctor if she won't tell him what's wrong. Under that intense pressure, she finally cracks. She confesses she thinks the doll is watching her. And even worse, she thinks it's actually moving. So that begs the big question. Was the doll really moving? The text is practically begging us to lean in and commit to the supernatural theory here. As the audience, we're being expertly led down a very specific, very familiar path. We've all seen this horror movie trope, right? The creepy doll that comes alive the second you look away. The author wants our eyes glued to the paranormal possibilities, right before delivering the ultimate rug pull. Chapter 3, The Gruesome Discovery. Worried by his wife's hysterical confession, the husband marches into the bedroom to physically inspect this doll. He finds it sitting motionless on the little table. He even notes that those big blue eyes are totally unchanged. He lets out this sigh of relief, thinking to himself, of course she's not moving. She couldn't have been. It's a momentary release of tension for us. The rational husband has seemingly debunked his wild ghost story. But just as he turns away, he catches a tiny flutter of movement out of the corner of his eye. He turns back. He picks the doll up. He looked closer. He holds his face right up to the doll's face, staring deeply into those big blue eyes, trying to concentrate on what he just saw. And what he sees is pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel. There is movement, but it's not the eye itself shifting. The movement is happening behind the eye. Something is physically squirming beneath the surface. And it is right at this exact sentence in the text that the mystery behind the doll completely shapeshifts. Before his brain can even process what he's looking at, the eye bursts open, outspills at least 10 wriggling maggots. This shocking, truly grotesque climax instantly yanks this mystery out of paranormal ghost story territory and drops it squarely into pure biological horror. The husband, in absolute shock, instinctively drops the thing and scrambles backward. But this explainer isn't just about a cheap gross-out moment. It is a total masterclass in shifting perspectives. Chapter 4, The True Monster Revealed. The second that doll hits the floor, the author executes a hard pivot. The primary question of the entire story flips. We are absolutely no longer asking what is wrong with the doll. Now we're asking, what on earth is wrong with the husband? Check out this stark contrast. It completely deconstructs the narrator's sheer psychopathy. On one side, you have the wife's panic. She is terrified, screaming from the other room, asking what's going on, genuinely fearing the supernatural. Now look at the husband on the other side. After dropping it, he just yells back for her not to worry. Then he picks it right back up and uses a tissue to calmly wipe away the maggots. He looks inside, sees even more of them pressing against the skin and the plastic outer layer. He isn't horrified by this biological reality. Actually, he's just annoyed at the decay. And here is the terrifying truth, revealed right through the husband's own internal monologue. So soon already? I had hoped she would have lasted longer. He isn't scared. He is disappointed. This reveals the darkest secret of all. This was never a plastic doll. The soft hair, the pretty dress, the big blue eyes, this was a morbid human creation. A real person that he murdered, preserved, dressed up, and literally gifted to his wife. Those maggots, they're just the inevitable result of his macabre arts and crafts project decaying a little too quickly. Which brings us to the chilling resolution of our explainer. Chapter 5, The Next Victim. So the husband has a problem. His gift is rotting. But rather than feeling an ounce of guilt or horror, his mind immediately shifts into problem-solving mode. We are about to uncover this serial killer's horrifying plans for the future. Let's break down his terrifying new methodology, which he bases entirely on his perceived mistakes. Step 1, throw away the old, rotting doll. It's just garbage to him now. Step 2, get a new one for his wife. But it is step 3 that will truly churn your stomach. He decides that with the next one, he's going to keep it alive at first. His logic here is entirely practical, completely devoid of human empathy. He figures keeping the victim alive will ensure the quote-unquote doll lasts longer before decaying. It's a staggering reminder of how authors use cold procedural logic to make a villain truly terrifying. And the worst part? He already has someone in mind. As he's thinking about tossing the old doll in the trash, he zeroes right in on his next target, little Katie. She lives down the block. He specifically notes that she has thick blonde curls, a physical trait he knows his wife always says she loves. This brilliantly shows how a predator hides his horrific crimes right in plain sight, treating human beings like they are nothing more than customizable parts for a project meant to please his spouse. I want to leave you with a final provocative question that actually echoes the very last line of Boudica's story. The narrator thinks about little Katie's thick blonde curls, and then he casually asks himself, doesn't she also have blue eyes? It's a question that entirely recontextualizes the story, tying perfectly back to those big, blue, unmoving eyes of the very first doll. It leaves us with a lingering sense of absolute dread, because we know exactly what this man is about to do. And we know that his poor wife is about to receive another perfect, terrible birthday gift. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, everyone. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Welcome to this explainer. Go ahead and lower the lights, settle in, and listen closely. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of a truly terrifying psychological horror narrative known simply as the Dark and Lonely Road. As we go through this, we're going to break down how an everyday neighborhood street can morph into a landscape of just absolute dread. We'll be looking at the architecture of fear, the really dangerous disconnect between generations, and the horrific consequences of leaving our childhood monsters behind.
Okay, let's dive into this. The entire central conflict of our story is perfectly captured in this single quote from the narrator's mother. There's nothing there in the dark that isn't there in the light. I mean, it sounds perfectly logical, right? It represents that confident, rational dismissal you get from adults. But for a kid who is actually standing out there in that darkness, this logic completely falls apart. Throughout this explainer, you're going to see exactly why that well-meaning adult confidence isn't just wrong, it's profoundly dangerous when stacked up against a child's absolute terror. Think about this for a second. Every night, you sit there in the comfort and safety of your own home. You lock your doors, you feel secure. But you really have no idea what is actually going on outside in the darkness. Because not far from your home, there is a dark and lonely place. You might not even know about it, but trust me, it's there. All over the country, in tiny small towns and sprawling cities, these isolated, terrifying places just exist, waiting.
Section 1. The Dark and Lonely Place. Establishing the Atmosphere. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast. To run a simple evening errand to the local store for a carton of milk or maybe a bag of sugar, the young boy in our story had to navigate this specific geographical anomaly. During the day, totally innocent. It's just this shady stretch lined with old, gnarled trees and vacant lots, completely harmless. But the second the sun goes down, it becomes a place of terror. There are no houses nearby, zero streetlights. Those tall, ancient trees completely block out the moon and the stars. It goes pitch black, casting these long, menacing shadows across the pavement. The environment itself literally turns hostile.
Section 2. Anatomy of Childhood Fear. Manifesting the Monster.
You know, the human mind absolutely hates a vacuum. So whenever you have to walk out into the dark, leaving the safety of lit houses and sidewalks behind, your brain fills that emptiness with terrifying threats. The boy's imagination just escalated wildly. And the ironic part, it was actually his mother's well-meaning warnings that fueled it. She'd warned him about the boogeyman, waiting for kids who strayed off the path. She warned him about evil men luring children with candy and puppies. So as he's walking, eyes glued to the trees, he starts catching glimpses of misshapen figures crouching in the pitch black, just waiting for the exact right moment to burst out and tear him apart. And this brilliantly illustrates how the darkness basically gave birth to a highly specific, hideous creature, this thing somewhere between animal and man. The narrator imagined it with slimy skin, long spindly limbs, sharp claws, and eyes burning like actual fire. But this wasn't just some mindless monster. It was a hunter. Step 1, it would hide up in the branches of those old trees. Step 2, drop down without making a single sound. Step 3, stalk unwary children in the dark. And Step 4, pounce. Section 3. The Midnight Encounter. The Chase.
So, the night all this imagination becomes reality, the boy is walking down that exact lonely road. And suddenly, the light up ahead just vanishes. The darkness shifts. He knows it's coming. He can physically feel the entity waiting right there in the pitch black. So he runs. It becomes this desperate, frantic sprint for survival. The entity is right behind him, and it is gaining ground rapidly. Just imagine the sheer, unadulterated panic here. He can actually feel its breath on the back of his neck. He is running as fast as humanly possible, running until he feels like his heart is literally going to burst inside his chest, trying to outrun the very nightmare his own mind had conjured up in those trees.
But he makes it. He gets back to the safety of his brightly lit house. You think it's over, right? Well, when he stands in front of his mirror, the horror is completely cemented, because this wasn't just his imagination. He looks at his reflection, and right there, right down the back of his shirt, is a long, jagged rip. It was exactly as if a massive, sharp claw had swiped at his back to drag him into the dark and missed his actual flesh by a single inch. The monster was real. Section 4. The blindness of adults dismissing the reality. So he has physical proof, right? He just had a near-death experience. He warns his mother, telling her, "Some night I won't come back. There's something out there in the dark." And what does she do? She laughs. She tells him not to be silly. I mean, what do adults really know about the world anyway? Children are the ones actually walking at night, totally vulnerable to the dark, wretched places of the world. But adults insulate themselves. They drive around in their heavy steel cars, never once having to actually walk through those shadows. They only trust what is neatly packaged and reported in the newspapers or on TV. They are completely ignorant of those lonely places where the darkness hangs like a thick cloud on the ground and where no bird ever sings. And because of that insulation, the boy knew there was absolutely nothing he could say to convince them of the truth. So, time marches on. The boy gets taller, he enters high school, he starts playing football. Then the real game changer. He learns to drive, he starts dating. As he transitions into a young man with a car, he leaves all that vulnerability of childhood completely behind. And as the years pass, the memory of that terrifying thing lurking in the darkness gets pushed down. It gets locked away in a distant, dusty corner of his mind. Basically, he survives by forgetting.
Section 5. A Tragic Reality. The Fate of Johnny Craig.
But here's the thing. While the narrator grew up and literally drove away, the road stayed right where it was. The darkness remained. And across the street lived a baby named Johnny Craig, a kid the narrator saw growing up but honestly rarely paid much attention to. Well, 3 days ago, Johnny Craig went missing.
The search ended on that exact same dark and lonely stretch of road. They found Johnny in the trees. The facts, as laid out by the authorities, are just grim. His body was torn, ripped, and crushed almost completely beyond recognition. But the adults, the police, who only trust what they can easily quantify, officially stated that he'd just been mauled by some kind of wild animal.
So, the crucial point is this absolute gut punch of a realization from our narrator. The very second he heard the news, he knew exactly what had happened. He realized Johnny Craig had been murdered by the thing my childhood fears had created. The narrator hadn't destroyed the monster at all. He had just outgrown it. He outran it. And in doing so, he left his own conjured nightmare behind in the dark, just waiting for a scared little boy walking home, a little boy who simply couldn't run as fast as he could.
Section 6. Waiting in your town, the aftermath, and the warning.
Obviously, a tragedy of this magnitude completely shatters the adult's blindness. It forces the town to react, to try and reclaim some sense of safety. But notice what they did. They attacked the environment, not the entity itself. Before the tragedy, those tall, old trees blocked the moon. After, the town forcefully cut those trees down. Before, it was pitch black with no lights. After, they put up bright streetlights. The adults finally removed the physical darkness, but they completely failed to capture or even acknowledge the actual threat that lived inside it.
Which means that stretch of road isn't dark and lonely anymore. But you know what else that means, right? The thing that lurked there is gone. Without the shadows to hide in, it's simply packed up and relocated. It went somewhere else, somewhere where the people are unsuspecting. It went to some other small town, a small town exactly like yours, where it will wait just like it did before, for some other frightened little boy or girl to come along in the dark. It really is only a matter of time.
Which brings us to the final thought of this explainer. Look out your window tonight. Really think about your neighborhood. Think about those places where the streetlights just don't quite reach. Is there a dark and lonely road in your town? And if there is, what is waiting in the branches?
Do not come any closer.
There is no escape.